Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the HLAA at Work webinar series. This one is exploring self-employment for people with hearing loss. Stop sharing my screen for just a minute here. I see folks coming in. We will be getting started in just 1 second. We do not have stream text. We have live captions happening. You'll just need to turn on the captions, but we have it being live captioned. Not sure who Lauren is. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Exploring Self-Employment for People with Hearing Loss. Thank you for joining us. My name is Melissa Cruz, and I'm the Chapter Engagement Manager for HLAA and your host today. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available for playback at a later time on the HLAA website, hearingloss.org. I'm going to start off by giving some tech tips for you. In order to turn on the captions, you're going to want to click the CC icon and click Show Subtitles. You can change the font in the subtitle setting. And then the chat is available for the technical use and panelists only. We'd like participants to use the Q&A icon to ask questions. We're going to be using this to facilitate questions and answers after the presentation. If you joined by computer, the presentation should be in side-by-side mode. The slides are going to be on the left and the panelists are on the right in a gallery view. You can change the size of your side-by-side view by hovering between the two screens and moving the gray bar to your desired size. Just a little disclaimer that HLAA does not endorse any products featured or discussed in this webinar. HLAA is providing an educational opportunity to learn about this product and how it could benefit people with hearing loss. I'm sorry, this is going back the wrong way. Our webinar today was organized by the HLAA Task Force for Accessible Inclusive Employment. The task force puts on several webinars each year related to employment issues. Past webinars can be viewed on the HLAA website. Lisa Yuan from the task force will be moderating today's discussion, and I'm now going to turn it over to Lisa.
Hey, thank you, Melissa, and hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. I've been a member of the Employment Task Force for a couple of years now, and I've been involved with HLAA for much longer, almost 20 years. And as someone with profound hearing loss, I've learned so much from being part of this organization, particularly from meeting others with hearing loss and learning about their experiences, which is why I find webinars like this one so helpful, especially when we have such fantastic speakers as we do today. So as you can see on this agenda, I'm going to start the discussion by sharing some brief statistics related to employment and people with hearing loss. And then we'll move into the panel discussion with our three guests, who I'll introduce shortly. And we'll have time at the end for questions from people tuning in. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick employment snapshot of people with hearing loss. And this is based on a 2019 report from the National Deaf Center. And what they found was that compared to people without hearing loss, people with hearing loss are less likely to be employed, less likely to be in the labor force, meaning they were not employed and they're also not looking for work, and more likely to be self-employed. And for reference, in this analysis, people with hearing loss included anyone who identified as having any type of hearing loss. Next slide. So this slide just shows the actual percentages of what I just shared. So the purple represents people with hearing loss, and the orange represents those without hearing loss. And you can see that only 53% of people with hearing loss were employed, compared to 76% of people without hearing loss. And then in the labor force, it's kind of hard to see the type here. So the bars on the left is the graph for employment. The middle is not in the labor force, and on the right is self-employed. So in the middle, it shows that 43% of people with hearing loss were not even in the labor force, versus 21% of people without hearing loss. And interestingly, people with hearing loss were slightly more likely to be self-employed than those without hearing loss. So to me, that tells an interesting story that perhaps because of barriers or discrimination that people with hearing loss may face in finding employment or staying employed, that they may be more likely to explore self-employment or entrepreneurship. So this is a topic that we're going to explore today, this topic of self-employment. And we have three very dynamic guests who've all taken that leap into self-employment. So I'm going to introduce them now, and we'll get this discussion started. So first, I would like to introduce Eyra Abraham. She's the founder of Lisnen, which is spelled Lisnen. And that's a startup that is changing the landscape of adaptive technologies for people with hearing loss using the latest AI technologies. She's also a workshop trainer for nonprofit and for-profit organizations on topics such as disability inclusion and entrepreneurship. And she was named one of Canada's top 100 Black women to watch in 2019. And we have McIntosh, who is the president, CEO, and founder of Safe and Clear, which provides a solution to help people access inclusive communications in settings where face masks are used. And just to note that she started this far before the pandemic, so she was way ahead of her time. Her modernized design includes a clear window that shows the user's mouth, allowing deaf and hard of people an opportunity to speech read and see facial expressions. Safe and Clear has also introduced the world's first FDA-approved transparent surgical face mask with level 1 and level 3 protection. And finally, we have Shari Eberts, who is a passionate hearing health advocate, HLAA board member, and internationally recognized author and speaker on hearing loss issues. She's the founder of the Living with Hearing Loss blog and online community, and executive producer of an award-winning documentary, We Hear You, about the hearing loss experience and co-author of a book called Here and Beyond, Live Skillfully with Hearing Loss, which is the ultimate survival guide to living well with hearing loss. So thanks to all of you for joining us today and being willing to share your experiences with us. I thought I would start by asking each of you to just share a little bit more about yourself, about your business or endeavors, and specifically what motivated you to become self-employed. So why don't we start with Eyra, and then we can go to Anne and then Shari.
Yes, thank you. This is a very good question because often, when I hear stories about entrepreneurs who get started in business, it often starts that they started their business when they were a kid in the diapers and they started and keep going on and have all kinds of experiences building a business. And that wasn't for me exactly. What ended up happening was I always believed that entrepreneurship is something that you need to pay your dues. You need to spend years and years crafting your business or your expertise in a specific subject before you can start. And my father, actually, he started his business right after he retired. And I didn't want to wait that long. And so there was an opportunity that came to me, which should have changed my mind about all of this. And what happened was, just to give you a little bit of background, throughout my whole career, I was what I called a temporary and contract queen. I had one contract over another. Sometimes it would be for 1 week, sometimes it would be for a month, sometimes for a whole year. And I was very loyal to these contracts. And so what ended up happening that after the last day of the contract, I'm unemployed again. And one day I was in England and there was a session at the British Library, similar to the Zach session that we're having right now. And there was an entrepreneur who was hard of hearing, and she was giving her presentation about working in consulting. And she started a business in consulting. And I was like, that was kind of inspiring to me because I was like, here's somebody like myself who's hard of hearing and able to start a business. And that was the catalyst to start for me. Now, my first business, and it failed because I went into the beauty business. Didn't have any experience in cosmetic or anything like that. I just thought, okay, this is an interesting idea. I've been traveling. I've seen all kinds of products and services, and I thought it would be really nice to bring them all in one place in North America. That didn't go well, but what my current business is where I had the most success. And the reason why is because as somebody who was hard of hearing, I went to bed one night without my hearing aid, and there wasn't a fire alarm in the condo building that I was living in. And I didn't know about this until a couple of days later. The property management had these notices that they were submitting to tenant, basically explaining that you should be taking fire alarms seriously and evacuating the building. But for my case, I was very frustrated because I was like, I did not hear. And with the reason because I couldn't hear, it wasn't because I made the choice that I didn't want to leave the building. And so I started looking for devices. And because of the building that I was in, they had different fire alarm tones for the hallways in my unit. It became really difficult to get a solution. And of course, there are different tones internationally. And so I had said, you know what, I'm not going to be living here for a long time. So I don't want to invest thousands of dollars and then find out I'm going to move somewhere else, which turns out I ended up moving to another small town for a job in a population of 2,000 living in a trailer. So in that case, the whole experience of having the technology would not have been transferable. And I waited for somebody to build it. And then it came to my current place right now, where I just I haven't done. I don't want to deal with this anymore. The anxiety of having to not knowing what's going on when there's a fire alarm. And I decided to take upon myself. So I developed a product that helped people with hearing loss to gain awareness of sound, calling for their immediate attention in the space that they're in. So that's how it got started in entrepreneurship in my business.
Thank you. Well, my story is a little bit different. I had gotten married and my husband and I decided it was about time to start our family. And we had done everything by what I call a textbook. We were stable in our job. We were in the house that we wanted to be in for the rest of our life. We were around family, so we had support. So we were just going through checking all these boxes saying, yep, we're ready to start our family. So we got pregnant and we were moving right along. We were checking all these boxes. and it came time to have the baby. I'm located in North Carolina, and so we went to deliver our baby in Charlotte. We had great health care, and I was there, and I was there, and I was there, and 25 hours later, I was still there, and we had not delivered our baby. So I notified the nurses that were on staff on shift at that time and said, hey, I've been here for 25 hours and we haven't delivered our baby. And at that point, they brought the doctor in and they said, well, to be safe and all, we're going to need to do a C-section. So of course I was fine with that. I wanted everything to be fine and safe, but that's where my world changed as a hard of hearing person. So I have 3 degrees in communication. I am a college professor. I teach communication classes. I understand how communication works. I understand when communication doesn't work well. So here I was in a situation when we went into the OR, people are masked up and I couldn't understand, I couldn't communicate. And I was like, this is just not good for business. And so I had to think, what am I going to do? Because I was unable to communicate. So I told my husband, I said, you're just going to have to answer the questions as the best you can. And at that moment that I realized when I was going through checking all these boxes, that somewhere in dating and courtship, my husband and I missed the episode where I was supposed to go through and tell him all the medications that I was allergic to, that I was supposed to tell him what my blood type was, and all these. And I realized, oh my goodness, I'm in a situation where my husband does not really have the knowledge, the background information to answer these questions about me and my body. And I said, this is not going to be good for me if something goes south. This is not good for the baby. So it was all fine. We had a C-section and the baby was healthy, but I really realized very quickly how my situation could have had a very different outcome. And that 1 in 5 Americans who is diagnosed with a hearing loss, this is something that you and I face on a daily basis. You and I are 1 heart attack, 1 stroke, 1 car wreck, 1 bad fall from needing to go into the healthcare system. If there's a pandemic or if you're in surgery or kidney dialysis or something like that, you have to wear a mask. So that creates a barrier. I was the same person in that OR as I was when I'm in a college classroom teaching. I still had my degree. I still had my knowledge of communication. I had not changed. The environment had changed, or the product. There was a product being introduced that was not universally designed. It was not good for somebody with a hearing impairment. So I said we need to change this. So that's how Safe and Clear got started in creating a clear mask. And we've been able to grow, and we have other masks that are now around. But this was really about meeting a need, and it had grown beyond what we need for deaf and hard of hearing people. Universal design means everybody can use it. We all like to see a friendly smile. We all like to be able to read facial expressions. It's not just people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Children like that. People who are on the autism spectrum like that. So there's so many of us who are visual communicators. So it's a way of expanding this out. So that's a little bit about the story behind Safe and Clear and how we got started.
All right, well, thank you, Anne, and thank you for including me on this panel this evening. So my self-employment is a little bit different than the other 2 speakers, so this is good. We've got a variety here. So about 10 years ago, I founded livingwithhearingloss.com, which is an online community for people living with hearing loss. And I've been writing and speaking about hearing loss issues ever since. And really, my journey to self-employment started with a question, which was, what can I do to make life better for people with hearing loss? And I was highly motivated for this because my hearing loss is genetic. And once I had children, I worried they might develop it too. And I wanted the path to be smoother for them. I had sort of a choppy journey on my hearing loss. I first noticed it when I was in my mid-20s. I was in graduate school, and pretty quickly in the first semester, I realized that I was not hearing very well in the class. But my journey started well before that, watching my father struggle with his own hearing issues. And he was highly stigmatized by it. He would do almost anything to hide it. He had his hair, grown long over his ears well after that was fashionable. And I remember at family parties, he would be off, in a corner by himself with his back to the festivities. And as a child, I didn't really know why, but when I developed my own hearing loss, I understood. He probably was having trouble hearing in that loud space, and he just couldn't bring himself to keep trying. So when I first realized that I was having my hearing problems in business school, I hid it because I was really following in his footsteps. And this included at work. So before my advocacy work started, I spent 20 years in the finance and consulting industries. And I remember I would sneak my hearing aids in, before important meetings, and then I would take them out as quickly as I could afterwards. And I only really told my closest colleagues about my hearing loss. And even then, I don't think they really understood how difficult it was for me to hear in certain situations. So I downplayed it. And looking back, I really wish that I had been more open about it. But it was only really when I switched careers and I started working for myself and working on projects that resonated more with my passions and my values, and with that motivation of really trying to improve things for my children, that I found that power to be my authentic self all of the time with my hearing loss wherever I was. And I think that's been one of the most rewarding parts of self-employment, actually, is that ability to create my work life in a way that represents me and what I care about. And so I no longer needed to fit into, some other environment. I was able to create my own environment. And so I had started the blog, livingwithhearingloss.com, and then I started writing for other outlets as well. So different online places within the hearing loss space and different magazines, and then worked my way into some mainstream publications as well. And then how Lisa was talking about during the pandemic, helped produce a documentary, and then also the book. So really just trying to do whatever I can do to follow that mission of making things a little bit easier for people with hearing loss.
Thank you. Oh, I can say that all your products have made things easier for people with hearing loss. So I can say I'm very grateful. I've used the masks. I regularly read your blogs, and Eyra, I was just talking to someone about how I need a solution for hearing my fire alarm better. Okay, so next question for all of you. Can you describe some of the challenges and victories you've experienced on this journey of self-employment or entrepreneurship? And why don't we start with Anne this time?
So some of the victories and the challenges on the journey is I did a lot of self-reflection in terms of figuring out where do I fit in there, because I wanted to be a part of the community and I wanted to be a part of the solution. So how is it that I can go through and do that? And when I went through the self-reflection, given my background in communication, a great big huge light bulb went off in my head, and I just had a massive epiphany. And that is to give thanks to deafness for all of the improvement and innovation that we have in communication. For example, Dr. Samuel F. Morse invented Morse code. Well, his wife was deaf. Dr. Alexander Graham Bell set out to create what you and I would call a hearing aid when he accidentally messed up, screwed up, and created a telephone instead, something that we use every day. Now, Morse code is analog, but we still have military application and everything else for Morse code and using the telephone. Dr. Benton Cerf, he's hard of hearing, and he is known as the co-father or co-inventor of the internet. something to bring us all together. And I'm sure all of us have been on the internet. We're on the internet right now. So just imagine if it were not for deafness, we wouldn't have Morse code. We wouldn't have telephone. We wouldn't have the internet. We wouldn't have a universal design clear math. So I give thanks to the innovation that has come out of this in a way that it has amplified and is transferable across so many communities. The reach is beyond the deaf and the hard of hearing. So for me, that was the victory in this, is to see, oh, how all of this stuff goes and fits in together. But the victories are not without the challenges. Part of the challenges on the journey is we tell our story and you're like, okay, I've said it. Well, no, you have to tell the story again. And you have to tell the story again. And sometimes people can get burned out or they can get tired of telling the story, but it is something that we have to be energized about. And that's where you really need that passion and say, am I doing the right thing? And is it the fit? So for me, that is where the victories have been. So many people come up to you or send you cards saying, you know, I was having my baby and my husband was deaf, and because of your math, he was able to be a part of the birth experience. Thank you. Or hearing from nurses during the pandemic who were calling in our line crying because they knew they needed to work, but they couldn't. They were having to be forced to take FMLA because they could not communicate with the math. And that was when we had math shortages and things like that. So we have seen heartbreaking stories, we have seen beautiful stories, and people just share a lot with us. So we know that we are impacting people's lives. People are able to work. We have deaf and hard of hearing postal service people who said they couldn't work their job because they couldn't understand what was being said to them through the mask, and they were concerned about maybe losing their job because they weren't following orders or directives and things like that, because there were so many communication barriers in place. So we wanted to address as much of that as we could, and so those were our victories. But some of the challenges that we run into is with the healthcare systems, with insurance companies, and some other things. And so what we're doing here is not taking it personally, but we're identifying those pain points, these barriers that other people have, and we're trying to come up with solutions to help them work and to resolve through that. What we've actually found is that the mask has solved other problems that we didn't even know needed to be solved. For example, have dental hygiene, dental providers, dental hygienists that will contact us and say, we will put your mask on and we didn't break out. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they would be like, well, other masks will cause us to break out, but your mask is hyperallergenic. And I would say, oh, because that wasn't a problem that we were trying to solve, but yet, you know, we were able to do that. So in this process, we're constantly learning. And I think part of entrepreneurship is you just don't know what you're going to run into, and that you're open to new information and to the science and the art of all of this. And it just kind of sort of goes together and enables you to want to get up the next day and do better.
Thank you. Shari, did you want to answer that next?
Sure. So I started really small. I think one of the challenges for me was being more public about my story. I was definitely still stigmatized, and having this realization of needing to set a better example for my children. And the first blog post that I actually ever published was ahead of Thanksgiving, about 10 years ago. And I was thinking about the trip out to my in-laws and, you know, just a little worried about it. How was my hearing loss going to impact this? And I put it out there. I didn't really know if anyone was going to read it, you know, but I just figured, let's just start in this direction. And like I said, I didn't even write it under my own name, but I was shocked actually at the positive response and the number of people who said they were feeling the exact same way heading into the holiday. And so it was sort of that challenge of putting yourself out there And then that victory of seeing, you're not alone, and sharing this can actually be helpful to other people as well. And so that encouraged me really to keep writing. And I used the skills that I had developed in my finance career to write, and also to learn how to market my messages to the core audience of people with hearing loss. And over time, I would gain followers and build partnerships. But it was slow, sometimes you would write something and it would resonate. And sometimes you would write something and it wouldn't resonate. And it still was the same amount of effort and the same amount of time, to create different products and different pieces of information, and people would react differently to them. But you just need to, keep moving forward. And building a brand is also a very slow process. And one thing I found is that hearing loss is just a challenging business to be in general. In the mainstream, we all know that it's sometimes not taken seriously. People would want to know, what's the news hook? What's the story here? What's the real information? And so that can be very frustrating, trying to show the value of what you're doing to people who might not 100% understand that. And what I think really has worked for me in terms of the journey is, what I try and do is just keep expanding my reach each year. So try something new, a new activity. So started with people with hearing loss, and then, tried to go into the mainstream and then the hearing care industry, and then adding on speaking and the film and the book. And now I'm working on these educational seminars that we're doing for large companies of hearing care professionals. And so it's kind of just like these concentric circles that each new project builds on and supports ones that exist and helps amplify earlier messages. And they all sort of have that central goal of helping people live better with hearing loss. And so I feel like each challenge sort of takes you to that new victory. And that's what, being self-employed is all about. So you sort of have to I think that just virtuous destruction, right, that creates the next opportunity.
Thank you. I can say I've referenced that article about the holidays and hearing loss like every year, I think. So, okay, Eyra?
Yeah, what Shari and Anne said, it resonates so well with me, what I'm going to say, because one of the biggest challenges I experience, particularly when you're dealing with building a technology in the assistive tech space, is the amount of resources that you need. And when I started, obviously I had a computer science background, but I didn't have enough resources to get started. And so that's where I went and pitched to investors. And part of pitching investors, if you ever have experience working and pitching to investors, a lot of them are hearing individuals. So going to what Anne said about storytelling, there is a lot of storytelling that you need to really hone in to get them to understand our experiences and really wanting to invest in our ideas or moving forward, what we want, our mission. And that was really one of my biggest challenges, really trying to get and convince people who obviously have no experience with hearing loss, have no idea what this industry is about in our experience, and getting them to write check. And I would say that the best thing about entrepreneurship, and it goes back to Shari said, I think from a personal perspective, I gained so much growth. When prior to my business, I felt stigmatized by hearing loss. So my friends and also my employer did not know about my hearing loss. And so suddenly when I had this business idea, I had to come out and announce to everybody, like, I have a hearing loss. And obviously because there's going to be a question, like, why are you doing this all of a sudden? This has no connection to anything in your previous employment. And I think it has been the most rewarding experience to be able to come out and talk about my hearing loss, but not also to contribute to this community, advanced technology, getting people to understand other newer technologies, particularly in the field of artificial intelligence, what that experience looks like for an individual with hearing loss. To be able to do that and be able to participate, even by making it a movement, an inch forward into society and in our lifetime, is quite a rewarding experience. And I think that is one of the best things about entrepreneurship, because I create the limits in my life and not from my employer. The sky is limited for me, and I get to learn and grow and improve my abilities. So yeah, that's how I would experience. I mean, I always say entrepreneurship is like 1 step forward, 2 step back, 10 step forward, 20 step back, and you just keep going around and around and around. But yeah, it is definitely, there's some ups and downs, but overall, there's some great stuff that are experiences that you can gain from it.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what is a typical day in your life like? And why don't we start with Shari this time?
Okay, great. Well, I don't know that I have a great answer to that question, because I don't think that there really is a typical day in self-employment. And that's actually one of the things that I like about it. I tend to get bored doing the same thing every day. But when you are in business for yourself, you run product development, you do quality control, you do marketing, finance. There's some days even that I'm doing tech support, working on my website. And so I find that really challenging and interesting, and it's hard to get bored with that. So some days are all about writing. More so now, I've been doing attending a lot of conferences and doing speaking on podcasts and webinars like this one. So it's kind of all different things. And then, of course, while you're doing all the work, you need to be very consistent about sending out pitches for new engagements, right? Or following up with potential opportunities to keep that pipeline full. So sometimes it's doing the work and sometimes it's getting the work. But I kind of like that. And I think sometimes projects can take even multiple years to come to fruition. But when they do, it's very, very satisfying. And I think one good thing about self-employment, or another good thing, is that you can do it depending on your business. You can do it from anywhere. And so that has been an opportunity for me to travel more so and to be able to work from different locations. And that's something that I really enjoy, because I think, like Eyra was saying, you don't have to fit your schedule or your limits to what other people are telling you to do. You can have weeks where you're working a ton, and then you can have a week where you're not working at all, if that's something that you can pull off. So just that flexibility means there's not really a typical day, but I think that's a positive.
Eyra and then Anne.
Yeah, I agree. Like every day is different. Changes all the time. And for myself, I would say there's a few things. As entrepreneurs, we're juggling multiple responsibilities. There's outreach, there's also product development, and then there is just generally engaging with the communities. And like today, trying to get engaged with people with hearing loss, the end user. So all of that it's pretty much what I do on a day-to-day basis. But there's also, and one of the biggest challenges when it comes to entrepreneurship is that other people come to other ideas. And like I said, I have, while I have my business, there's other opportunities that I do with the speaking, particularly in AI and technology. People want to hear stories, the perspective of people with hearing loss. So there's that, dealing with that. So there can be kind of a distraction among the whole focus. And that's something that I have to work hard on, is there's so many opportunities that come in and you are actively engaged in wanting to tackle that. But overall, it's just a matter of like doing outreach, outbound, whether it is who is the people that I can actually help me move the business forward. So finding those type of people. The product development, I work with a university who are helping with the artificial intelligence component of the app. So there's also engaging with students, and we do feedback on what some of the research projects that they've done throughout the couple of weeks. And then other times, it's just really about how do I get my message and communicate with the hearing loss community so they're aware? And so there's that element of marketing involved. They're pretty much my day-to-day, day-to-day activities.
So a typical day for me really starts out with a to-do list that I started generating probably the night before, include things that I didn't get accomplished that day, add to the list, and then as I lay down at night, kind of decompress, other things come to mind, so I write it down, and then off to sleep I go. So I'll start out with emails and moving through, but in running the company, I have employees. So I have to meet with my accounting people or meet with our marketing people, our sales rep. So we do that. We have distributors. So we're meeting with them. We'll deal with fulfillment. Do we need to order more pallets of masks? You know, do we need somebody at the warehouse? So there's a lot of logistical that are involved in that, in addition to the sales of taking calls and then interacting. We really do a lot to interact with our customers to know who they are, because that's how we improve the product, is we listen to the customers. What else would you like to see this product do? And so, and then as we expand the product, and what other types of products do you need? So we're doing that. Safe and Clear is a C corporation, so we have shareholders and we have board of directors. So I have bosses, and so I answer to bosses. So just being an entrepreneur, you're your own boss, but you answer to other people as well. I have to answer to the customer, I have to answer to the distributors and things like that. And not to get lost in that. I mean, if you're in a relationship, if you have a family, you have that work-life balance, you have to build that into a typical day. So if you're faith-based, if you're doing things with your church, if you're doing Bible studies, or if you're doing stuff. So I mentioned that I'm located out of the Charlotte, North Carolina community, and we suffered a tragedy in our community yesterday in law enforcement, and a lot of the communication workshop classes that I did for years, I did with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. So that was not on my to-do list today from yesterday, but it was on the list to interact and to talk to these people, check in on them and see how they're doing. So you're constantly working these things into your business and into your time, because it becomes who you are. And you're working even when you're not working, and you're not working, and you're working. And so it's like, do you turn it off? And I'm like, no, you don't. I mean, and that's the passion, I think, for entrepreneurship. How many of us can turn hearing loss off? Are you not part of hearing 24/7, 365? I mean, we can't turn it off, right? It's with us. It lives with us. It sleeps with us. It eats with us. It stays with us all the time. So it becomes a part of our identity in lots of ways. So how do we manage that process? So all of that is built into a day, and it's learning, going back to the reflection. So how do I make today better than yesterday? And how will tomorrow be better? So that's that expansion, and that's that moving out, and that's where you get the growth. And so for me, you don't really have those typical days, but you are energized to get up and to go and to do those things. And the webinars and the technology hasn't been a greater time to have hearing loss. We have so much available. I mean, just the telephone. I remember years ago, you didn't use the telephone. Now we use the telephone all the time, because it's basically a computer, right? And we can text, and we can do Zoom, and we have all these captioning and speech to text apps and everything. And so the telephone, before 20, 25 years ago, we were probably cursing the telephone, and today we're giving our blessings for it.
Okay, next question is, what advice do you have for others with hearing loss who are seeking self-employment or entrepreneurship? And I'm going to start with Anne this time, and then go to Eyra, and then Shari.
So advice for others with hearing loss, it's about finding your passion, and what will you put on earth for? What do you want to do? What is your legacy? If that's something that you want to do, if you feel so motivated to leave the world a better place than you found it. Some people have that drive, and some people don't. So I don't think it's a chastising, do you check these boxes, you are for entrepreneur. We all bloom at different times. And the way, as you heard today, the stories of how we got here are all different. So there's probably more art than there is science to this. And then just how you motivate to move through that. But my advice for others who are thinking about doing this is to really do your research. Make sure you have a tribe of support, whether it be your family, whether it be other like-minded hearing loss people. HLAA, I've been involved. I remember when we were self-help for the hard of hearing, when we were, with Rocky Stone and all that. So we evolved for a long time, but a lot of support, ambassadors, and advocates that you feel like that you have all that in place. And part of that, in terms of that advice, there is who do you need to connect to help to move these ideas and to not be afraid to talk to people and to get insight and to get input, even if they're naysayers, even if they poo-poo the idea and say this isn't going to work. Sometimes listening to them can give you some critical insight that you can move past that pain point. You can overcome that barrier. Usually when I put together meetings or if I put together focus groups, I try to make sure that everybody in there is smarter than me, that they have a skill set, that they bring something to the table that I don't have. Because if everybody's like me, then we're not going to get that diversity. We're not going to get those different perspectives. We're not going to make that progress that we need to make. So it really is about coming out of yourself and having that team behind you. And people are going to be your biggest asset. People, whether they work for you or whether they're your customers or something like that, that the people there, that would be the best advice, I think, for anybody who's thinking about doing this, is really trying to put together a good support group.
Yeah, those are good points, Stan. And I would add to it is one of the things that I say, and it comes from my first failure, my first business that I had failure with, and it's thinking about what problems that you want to solve. Because most of us come with an idea, but we don't really know who are going to be the ones who are going to buy the product or the service that we're going to need, what we want to provide. So I think it's really important to start with what problems can I solve, and finding ways that you can help find a solution to solve those problems. The second thing I would say is, and this comes a lot because if you're consuming a lot of content on the internet or reading books, there's this idea that entrepreneurship and business has to be $1 billion business. And I would really caution people who are trying to match those frameworks because it might not be a good fit for you. So really think about what kind of lifestyle that you want, because you have to realize that entrepreneurship, the average income is about $50,000 a year. Some people might be working a couple of hours a week. Some people may be working 80, 100 hours a week. And everybody, it's just a matter of figuring out what is the sacrifice that you want to achieve or you want to take on when you're doing that business. Because there is going to be some element of sacrifice, whether it's sacrifice of time or sacrifice of how much work and opportunities and product that you can create to put out there. So just really thinking about what exactly do I want to achieve and how do I want to live my life? And I would say the other thing is, because entrepreneurship has a lot of uncertainty, finding coping mechanism to help with the uncertainty, I think is really important. And for me, it's about cultivating a growth mindset, knowing that I can own the person that I can control. I can't control the rest of the 7 billion people on this planet. And that for that reason, I focused on like, what can I do to improve? What can I do every day to help deliver and get better over time? And that frees myself from the pressure of having to deal with like where things are not always going the way I expected. And so I'd say that those are the 3 things that I would like you to consider when you're thinking about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I think those are great points. I mean, I would say find something that means a lot to you, because you're going to hear a lot of no's before you get to the yeses. And so it's important to have that passionate and consistent motivation to make it work. So choosing what you do wisely is really critical. And then understanding your goals, this is going to help you set priorities, and then you can use your goals and your priorities to guide how you spend your time, what projects you take on, and what order you do things. I would say one thing that I don't think either Anne or Eyra mentioned is to say yes a lot. And I think especially at the start. So set a goal, like my goal was for each writing assignment I did or each speaking engagement I did, to just get me one more thing. And then that would lead to the next one and the next one. And with each one, your business and your expertise starts growing. And you can, over time, start receiving higher payments for contributions because you have sort of that background and that experience. And I would encourage you to say yes to things, even if you're not 100% sure that you can do them. So an example is when Roxana reached out to me to help to work on this documentary about hearing loss during the pandemic. And I didn't know how to film things, or write a script, but we learned together. And I think that's one of the joys of self-employment, is that you can learn how to do things that you might have never expected would be part of your life. And I would agree with Anne. I think she said to partner with other like-minded entrepreneurs and to choose people with complementary skills and strengths. I agree with that. And then just one last thing on the tactical side is I would say to leverage social media. I don't think anyone's talked about that yet. First, of course, for marketing to reach your core audience. And I think you have to really experiment with different platforms and different types of posts. But I have found it really interesting. That's the only way I've found to reach and to develop a brand, a broad audience and a brand with similar interests across the globe. And we're really looking for people who care about what we care about, not that they live next door. So social media has its downsides, but I think in this way, for someone who's self-employed, it can really be a good magnifier. And it can also be a good way to help you in your education. So for example, when I started pitching mainstream outlets, I joined a bunch of writing groups on Facebook. And I learned a lot about it. And it's amazing, really, what people will share in terms of information and support. I mean, we have our hearing loss groups as well, but there are other groups that you can join in terms of skills that you need as an entrepreneur, and people can help you in that way.
Thank you all. We have 10 minutes left, so I wanted to get to some questions from the people tuning in. Unless there's anything else that any of you very quickly want to share that we hadn't gotten to, any takeaway messages? Okay. First question, in going to the Q&A, I never told my employer about my hearing loss because I'm worried to lose my job. Do you think I must tell them? I can kind of say that you don't have to tell your employer. There's no legal requirement that you have to disclose your hearing loss, and your employer they cannot ask you about your disability legally. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to this. I don't think there's any single right or wrong answer to that question. It really depends on your circumstances. And I can actually provide maybe a helpful resource, which is the Job Accommodation Network. They have some information on that. So I can put that into the Q&A for you. Next comment, this next one is just a comment that says, I love clear masks. They use them at the tutoring center where I work during the pandemic. Sadly, doctors and nurses don't use them, or very rarely. Okay. Oh, Anne, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to chime in that, one of the things that I learned from being at Charlotte HLAA and Lake Norman HLAA is just being an advocate and just asking. So these doctors and nurses may not know about universal design masks. So, I mean, they're in the urgent care centers or the doctor's offices or wherever they're working in medical settings. So they learn things from their patients. So you can say, there's a clear window mask. Can you please use it? I'm requesting this accommodation. And you can maybe ask before, if you have an appointment coming up, say an annual appointment or something like that. I had a dear friend who was struggling with some cancer treatment, and she would take them with her to her chemo treatment and share that. And eventually they started using these masks. And so it's up to us to advocate for us, because back to Shari's point, a lot of us have genetic hearing loss. We're talking about our children. We're talking about our grandchildren. We want to leave this a better place for them. So if you have doctors or dentists or nurses not wearing these masks or accommodating them, you can certainly ask that they do that.
Okay, next question is about financial backup. Do you have a financial backup? Did you have a financial backup when you started your own business? Does anyone want to answer that one?
I could talk a little bit from my experience. So in terms of funding, I had to do a lot of pitch competition and grant applications to get started. So there are opportunities to get financial, but in terms of your living, I would highly recommend that you have an income source to maintain your living expenses and stuff on the side. One of the things that entrepreneurship, we think we're going to be able to get rolling right away. And timing, it's really hard to dictate, especially when you're not sure how long your product is going to take, or how much who's going to write that next check or buy your product and services. So really just find ways to keep yourself financially secure that you can pay your bill, and then start slowly building your momentum in your business.
Okay, next question is a little similar to the other one about disclosing. Are there ways we can communicate in the workplace so people with hearing loss do not get lost? There are so many products out there that can be used in the workplace. All employees have hidden disability. Again, I highly recommend the Job Accommodation Network website. They have tons of information related to this. It's askjam.org. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on this. Again, it's very specific to each person's workplace. Shari?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it is very specific to each person's workplace, but I know for me, looking back, I wish that I had been more open about my hearing loss. I had, and I'm sure many people do, I had a track record of good performance that I had done while I had my hearing loss. I had a lot of things to point to that were positive about my performance. And so I feel like if I had been more open about it, I would have given my colleagues and my boss and my employer the opportunity to help me and to support me. And I would say one thing also that I recommend people do is to do your own research. And I think, Lisa, that's what you were referring to with this, the website that you were talking about, is to come with solutions, right? If you are having difficulties at work, if you come with problems, then you're just, a problem. But if you come with solutions, then they can look at your track record, look at how important you are as an employee, and you can work together to solve them. So that's not going to work in every situation, but I hope that that would be how it would work in most situations.
Great, thank you. Okay, we got a few minutes. It sounds like everyone started up their business for the purpose of fulfilling a need or to help others. Is this true, or was it to bring income in as well? How much are you working, being self-employed? Are you able to financially sustain yourself? Anyone want to answer that one?
I'll start with this one. So a business, if it's a for-profit business, you're either going to offer a service or you're going to sell a product. So service or product, and sometimes people do both. So is it to fulfill a need or to help others? And the answer to that is yes, most businesses do that. In terms of bringing in income, that was not my first motivating reason to start the company. I wanted to make sure that there were clear, accessible maps available for people. So how do I go about doing that? And it turned into a job, a job for me. But I also do this in tandem with other things because I've remained a college professor. I still teach. I teach at Gallaudet University. So we have deaf and hard of hearing students. And so I say to them, you know, what are you doing after graduation? What is your major? Have you thought about nursing? Have you thought about dental hygiene school? Have you thought about medical school? To get them to think that they can do those things because the barriers are not there now that were there 30 years ago. We have clear maps. We have amplified stethoscopes. This is also a way to diversify back to the slide that Lisa was showing where you have unemployment or underemployed deaf and hard of hearing. There's no reasons why they can't go into these fields. So I'll be going to a medical conference in Chicago in June where pretty much everybody there is going to have a hearing loss. And so there'll be x-ray technicians, surgeons, ENT, general practitioners, doctors, dentists, everything. So that will be, it's always a real joy to go there to know that you're helping these people to sustain themselves in a career. In terms of financially sustaining yourself, it really just depends, I think, on your philosophy of financial security and financial literacy. Do you depend on one job, one breadwinner, or do you have several jobs in case one job ebbs and flows or something else? So I teach at Gallaudet, I teach for University of Maryland, I teach in different places, and I do this. So I do a lot of different things because one, I enjoy doing that, and because I learn from one and it feeds into the other. So it kind of puts together. Now, some people want to go to a job, work at 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then they want to come home. An entrepreneur, you don't turn that off. So when you come home, you're still working. I mean, I do meetings on Saturday and Sunday. So I don't know if I answered that question for Lynn Roy.
I think we're out of time. Melissa, are you there? And can you address that we have remaining questions? Can those be answered
Absolutely.
via email?
I've just put up the slide with our panelists website information. We do have the Q&A, and we will be getting answers to that and put that up when we put up the recordings. And we do want to thank our panelists today and thank our amazing captioner. We will be sending out a link to the webinar once it's up and on our website. And included with that will be a survey. We really appreciate your feedback on how this webinar went and topics that you might like to see for future webinars. And we just want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.